before we had Kindles and Barnes and Nobles, and before home printers that always seem to run out of ink exactly when you need to print your paper that's due tomorrow morning, before Gutenberg's printing press, before scrolls and papyrus, we had voice. Yes, we, the Homo sapiens, are the talking primates. We alone have the unique and powerful ability to converse and coordinate in massive numbers. At first, we talked about objective truths. We told our tribe about lions in the savannah. We told our tribe about a particular tree with tasty-ass fruits. Then, at some point, we started talking about subjective truths, stories. I'm zooming in and speeding up past a lot of epicness, but at some point, boom, the apes start writing. This is, of course, From Clay to Kindle, a very short history of the book. And excuse me if I'm flippant. Okay, so back to our topic. Sometime during the 4th millennium BCE, the apes started scribbling on clay. This occurred in the so-called cradle of civilization from the speakers of a Semitic language. Their scribbles on clay would come to be called cuneiform. Cuneiform being the first iteration of a family of scripts in the Sumerian writing system. Brief reminder on language. Languages evolve and mutate, kind of like biological organisms do. In the same way we can classify organisms with taxonomy, linguists can classify languages with linguistic families. There are a bunch of them. They're like the linguistic roots that sprout our modern languages. As Homo sapiens settled in distinct geographic locations, they too developed distinct languages. Language isn't the focus of this video, but it's a cool thing to think about. Anyways, back to the topic. The folks who wrote the earliest form of script were speaking a Semitic language. That's a branch of the Afro-Asiatic language family. The words these Sumerians wrote manifested as drawings at first, which are called logograms. In those days, cuneiform was recorded on clay tablets with styluses, but sometimes it was scratched onto metal or stone. An awesome example is this fragment from a much larger stele, or block of stone, from the early dynastic period in Sumer, called the Stele of Vultures. It commemorates a victory in battle against an enemy city-state. So, we did one step on our journey towards the book. We took our guttural noises and converted them into scribbles on clay. But stele are heavy and hard to carry, so are clay tablets. We need something lighter. Now, I need to mention another group that was speaking a completely different language. This group is, of course, the ancient Egyptians. Sometime around the 3rd millennium BC, the Egyptians pioneered a novel technology to preserve their language. They invented papyrus paper. The cypress papyrus is a semi-aquatic plant that grows in buttloads on the banks of the Nile. The ancient Egyptians harvested the stalks of this plant, then tediously removed the fibrous cores from the stalks and the hard outer shell. The fibrous cores are then cut into thin strips and weaved together into something that resembles a carpet, kind of. Anyways, the glue-like sap secreted by the stalks acts as a binding agent, and after the fibrous core carpet is pressed, hammered, and dried, voila, you have a smooth and thin writing surface. They used papyrus to make a bunch of other shit, like sails and clothes, but we're gonna focus on the proto-paper they created. Papyrus paper technology crossed the Mediterranean Sea with help from the sea-bearing Greeks. The Greeks, who traded with the ancient Egyptians as early as the 7th century BC, were by and large an oral culture. They relied on oral traditions to both preserve and disseminate their collective knowledge and culture. They literally couldn't shut the fuck up. The Greeks used papyrus to write some things down, but also pioneered their own ingenious writing tool, that of the wax tablet. Essentially, they had a slender wooden tray with a flat layer of wax. A stylus could be used to etch in the wax, and the wax could be erased with a flat spatula. Pretty nifty. Although their culture was largely an oral culture, as previously stated, they did write some things down, like trade agreements or transactional receipts. Okay, so now we're gonna skip ahead a little bit. The ancient Romans, who cross-pollinated with the ancient Greeks and other Italic tribes in Latium, developed a literate culture. But reading and writing wasn't limited to the aristocracy. From the prevalence of graffiti in Roman cities and colonies, it's inferred that perhaps literacy was a feature common to all strata of Roman society. As well, certain ancient Romans of affluence would be among the first to amass large collections of papyrus scrolls, like the private libraries of Cicero, for example. Lengthy papyrus texts were conveniently rolled into scrolls. Scrolls were written in columns that would gradually move longitudinally. The text would need to be unrolled slowly. Some scrolls could reach 9 meters in length. Papyrus, although cheap and abundant, didn't take well to the dry climate in Europe. As well, papyrus was highly combustible. As a result, we have a relatively scant amount of surviving papyrus scrolls from antiquity. Yay! Now we got rid of those heavy rock and clay tablets, and we have something kind of like paper. But we need to do better than papyrus, because it's too fragile. A more robust alternative to papyrus would be parchment. Sometime in the 2nd century BC, in the Greek city of Pergamum, modern-day Turkey, we see the introduction of parchment. If you're a vegan, you might want to skip ahead. Anyways, parchment is made from the skins of sheep, goats, and calves. The skins are removed from the animals' bodies, cleaned from hair, then stretched on wooden frames. While they stretch, the skin is expertly scraped with a particular knife. The skin can be wetted and dried and stretched some more until it reaches the desired thickness. After the process, the skin is conditioned. Skins of the best quality were traditionally from young sheep and calves, making a fine parchment that is called vellum. High-quality parchment would continue to be the chief method of preserving texts. Okay, so we're getting closer to modern books, but still, no paper. So where did paper come from? During the 1st century AD in China, Kai Lun, a court official, invented the process for making a product that is not far off from today's paper. Similar to the Egyptians with papyrus, Kai Lun also used fibrous plant material as the basis for the paper. His technique differed from the Egyptians because he soaked and grinded the different fibrous plant material in a process called maceration. The plant material included mulberry and hemp. After they were macerated, he would suspend the fibers in water and then use a strainer to collect the minuscule fibers suspended in the water. These minuscule fibers would then be pressed and flattened and eventually would create a thin and durable writing material. Paper was traded as a precious commodity on the Silk Road, and by the 8th century was used in Central Asia. By the 15th century, paper mills started to pop up in Europe. Okay, we've made another step forward towards books, but we're still using scrolls. The first book, as we know it, is dated to the 4th century AD, and we can thank the Christians. The Christians pioneered what is referred to today as the Codex. The Codex is the predecessor to the modern-day book, wherein rectangular pieces of parchment and later paper would be stitched together along a common edge and then bound in leather. The Codex was convenient for a number of reasons. It took up less space. Both sides of the paper could be written on. It was protected and robust compared to the scroll, and collections could be stacked or shelved, and different volumes could be easily identified. As well, the Codex introduced a completely new reading experience. Scrolls were often read from beginning to end, but the Codex could be browsed. You can skip a few pages backwards and forwards, and this encourages reflection and rigorous research. At first, codices were pages with parchment. Like I said before, parchment was durable and could allow for ornate decorations. The main disadvantage was that parchment making was relatively difficult, and this resulted in parchment-paged books being a scarce commodity. This scarcity fostered a recycling culture, wherein redundant codices would be thoroughly washed of their text, cleansed, and then reused. In some occasions, the original text would re-emerge, and this type of codex is called a palimpsest. Codices were made by artisan bookbinders, and the scripts would be copied onto them by hand. This job of copying texts was a laborious effort. Hand-copied books were thus scarce and costly. Nice, so now we have books, but they're scarce and we're still really far away from Kindles. In 1440, a German businessman changed everything. After years of toiling and experimentation, Johannes Gutenberg revolutionized bookmaking with his movable type printing press. This press could produce thousands of pages per day and created a boom in book production and supply. Books ceased to be a scarce commodity reserved for a nobility. Although the proliferation of non-ecclesiastical texts would be stifled by the church for a few centuries to come, in due time, books would come to cover all topics imaginable and touch the lives of all of us. Okay, so now we have books, but what about the Kindle? So sometime in the early 2000s, Amazon's founder and CEO, Jeffrey Bezos, instructed his company to build the best e-reader. E-readers had been around, and they utilized e-ink technology, which was founded in the late 90s in MIT. And so, Amazon Kindle hit the markets in 2007. Its thin design allows you to carry thousands of pages in your pocket. We did it. We went from massive clay tablets to e-ink. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you guys found any of this fun, valuable, informative, please subscribe or at least comment and let me know. I'd love to hear from you guys. Yeah, and don't be douchebags. Mwah. Bye.